In terms of making money in the music business, the fans are the most important element without question. For as much love and care as you put into the music, it's not going to matter the slightest if no one buys it. Still, that being said, that hasn't stopped some bands from tearing into their fan base. Now, are all the entries on this list instances of mistreatment? No. Not on principle, at any rate, but the fact remains, whether it's at a concert or online, these artists have had a few choice words to say about the more outlandish people who enjoy their music. The best musicians tend to find a way to be respectful to anyone who comes to see them, but sometimes things do get a little nasty between the crowd and the entertainment. With that in mind, I'm Will for WhatCulture, and here are 10 hard rock bands that insulted their own fans. 10. Maynard, James Keenan, Tool. Despite the great music Tool have put out, they've always been one of the more difficult bands to love. Though many of us have got used to the band's trolling nature, many were concerned when Maynard James Keenan began calling out the more fanatical Tool fans. When speaking to Billboard magazine back in 2015, Keenan expressed a genuine love to the people who have enjoyed his music, but was not enamored with the people who hang on every word he says. This initially sent fans into a frenzy, but Keenan quickly clarified the comments by calling out people who treat them as godlike figures rather than actual normal people. Since then, Keenan has been known to openly mock Tool fans, but only in good fun. This involves everything from calling them names during a show to trolling them by playing 2 songs and then pretending to leave the stage. 9. Beastie Boys. In the world of hard rock music, the Beastie Boys served as a healthy change of pace from the endless amount of metal bands sweeping the nation. While still being a hip-hop group first and foremost, this trio out of New York used rock beats and an aggressive delivery that made them easy to headbang along to. In fact, the riffs were so infectious on some songs that most fans probably didn't even know they were being dissed. Across the band's first album, Licensed to Ill, the Beasties called out the macho lifestyle, with Fight for Your Right to Party being the linchpin. From one verse to the next, the band plays up the caricature of a college kid who only cares about partying all the time. However, the band's initial satire of the lifestyle ended up coming back to haunt them. Instead of being taken as satirical, most of the jocks of the day picked up the song's message as their anthem, which led to the Beasties dismissing the song entirely. Imagine dissing your fans in a song so banging that they didn't even realize. That's some skill right there. 8. Kurt Cobain, Nirvana. It's absolutely astounding how Nirvana gained such mainstream attention in such a short amount of time. New fans may have been popping up left and right, but Kurt Cobain had no time for the more mainstream attention. Instead of having the cool underground fans of their early years, Cobain was almost appalled to see jocks at his shows. He would occasionally mock his newfound audience as the same kind of people who used to kick his ass in high school for making music. Based on his firm feminist and political beliefs, Cobain also took a few jabs at those fans who were showing any form of racism or sexism in their day-to-day lives. In fact, Cobain made it pretty cut and dry on the inner sleeve of the band's B-side record Incesticide, where he literally encourages any racist or sexist fan to not buy his music because of his hatred towards them. Cobain may have been grateful for his success, but when it came to the awful behavior of some of his fans, he was not afraid to speak his mind. 7. Wes Scantlin, Puddle of Mud. Ever since he hit it big, Wes Scantlin has had a bit of a checkered past. From multiple DUI arrests to his terrible live performances, Scantlin has lived up to the title of insufferable rock star more than a few times. There have been many instances of Scantlin walking right off stage after a performance starts and flipping off the crowd, but the worst case came in 2016 at a gig in Ohio. Just a few songs into the set, Scantlin started going on a long rant about how someone in the front row was responsible for, quote, stealing his house the previous year, and proceeded to continue heckling this man for a few minutes. After a few more seconds of jamming on stage, the band looked on in horror as Wes proceeded to throw on his jacket, heckle some more while off the mic, and leisurely just walk off stage. Since then, the club itself issued an apology to every fan in attendance and offered to reimburse their tickets. 6. Courtney Love, Hole. Hecklers can be rough. No matter how much power you think you have on a public stage, there's always a possibility of some jerk coming to the front and trash-talking you right to your face. Many artists have handled this well over the years, But in Courtney Love's instance, it seemed to go a little too far the other way. In a massively disrespectful move, a fan at one of Hole's shows turned up with an image of Kurt Cobain on the front. While it seemed innocent enough at first, Love became more and more agitated before finally going off on the fan for touching on a still fresh wound. She may have been right to be angry, but what happened next opened up a lot more questions. Though Love initially started going off on how she has to live in a world without her famous husband, she took some more time to trash talk former Nirvana drummer Dave Grohl for being kicked out of the band and telling the fan to, quote, go see the Foo Fighters if they wanted to pull any more of that nonsense. After that didn't go over well, Love left the stage, leaving the audience uncomfortable, perplexed, and musically jilted. 5. Bruce Dickinson, Iron Maiden. It is a blessing for any band to have legions of fans around the world. While having a cult following is certainly special, there's nothing better than having a sea of people singing your songs back to you. Even though Iron Maiden has built up a bona fide army of metalheads, frontman Bruce Dickinson is a bit wary of the fair weather fans. When speaking in interviews, Dickinson would stand by the fact that though he is proud of the music he's made, he outright refuses to play in a nostalgia act. This has led to many of the band's recent sets being dominated by material from their latest output, rather than a balanced assortment of classics. Now, it is a noble effort for Dickinson to stand by his newer output, but it actively started to turn villainous when he proceeded to rip up a fan's sign in the crowd that asked if they could play one of their big hits. There's being proud of your work, but it should never get to the point where you actively try and negate your previous classics. 4. Jim Morrison, The Doors. The Doors' beginnings in the mid-60s were full of great potential. With the band's eponymous debut and equally deranged Strange Days, they were on the road to becoming kings of the hard rock world with their signature twist of psychedelic chaos. Once the band stopped in Florida though, everything started to change. With Jim Morrison drinking heavily at this point in the band's career, the show seemed to show the great psychedelic band on their last legs. Instead of the captivating poetic presence he had become known for, Morrison is pretty irritable throughout most of the band's performance. When the audience gets restless when the band doesn't tear into Light My Fire, Morrison proceeds to go off on the crowd, calling them a bunch of slaves cowering to the power of authority. After going through a public roast of his fans, Morrison asks what they want before nearly exposing himself on stage. Once everything was settled, Morrison was faced with a fine for indecent exposure and never went on another tour with the band again. 3. Axl Rose, Guns N' Roses. Ever since the dissolution of the original Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose has been one of rock and roll's most impressive divas. From his reclusive behaviour to his insistence on never showing up on time, Rose clearly plays by his own rules regardless of what the consequences are. When Axl was out with the new Guns N' Roses in the late noughties, he became angry when he saw an all too familiar face in the crowd. This face was not a person per se, but instead a casual GNR fan who decided to wear a t-shirt with Slash on it to the show. Innocent enough, but Rose was not having any of it. In the middle of the song It's So Easy, Rose ordered the security of the show to escort the fan out of the venue and asked for him to disrobe so Axl could mock him. There have been plenty of uncomfortable situations for rock stars, but stunts like this just feel like a shallow frontman acting like a school bully to the very kids who look up to him and paid money to be there. 2. Aaron Lewis, Stained. At the beginning of the noughties, Stained were one of the more whiny bands in the world of hard rock. In an era where nu metal was still booming, some of the band's material, like It's Been a While, found its way onto rock radio and made fans out of many disillusioned teens. As time has gone on though, frontman Aaron Lewis has become an absolute chore to deal with when on tour. During some of Lewis's last few solo tours, he's featured an acoustic segment where he takes things down a notch. And by down a notch, I mean absolutely silent. When Lewis was trying to perform on his acoustic one night in Ohio, he refused to continue on unless nobody made a noise. Unable to contain the crowd to his satisfaction, Lewis opted to just put down his guitar and walk off stage, ending the set early. What's even more mind-boggling is that this isn't the last time that happened. At another gig in Texas, Lewis found it uncomfortable to perform without quiet and left the stage again after mockingly saying that he couldn't speak Spanish after someone called him out. The rock star life can be stressful for sure, but this kind of thing is one of the more tasteless diva moments in rock history. 1. Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters. Being famously one of the nicest guys in rock, you really have to go the extra mile to get a rise out of Dave Grohl during a show. That in mind, he did have some very unkind things to say to a fan at one of their performances in the late noughties. As the band started the acoustic segment of their show, Grohl brought everything to a halt in the middle of Skin and Bones after seeing someone fighting in the crowd. After he stopped playing, Grohl tears this guy to shreds as he berates him like a child and demands that he gets out of the show, proudly proclaiming, "You don't come to my show to fight, you come to my show and dance." Proudly looking after the safety of his shows, it's almost a special talent that Grohl has that even when he tears an audience member into pieces, he still ends up looking like the better person. And there you have it, folks, 10 hard rock bands that insulted their own fans. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at YouSlyDogU. I'm Will for WhatCulture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.